I was in a special unit, a special machine gun company of the 15th Brigade, and I was planted because of my training to be in charge of a couple of machine gun crews, and told to set them up and face a sloping ground away from us, and then it became more sloping. It was convex slope, and it rather shook me. I was told, all right, what we do, we just sit there, and anybody coming over that ridge, whether they were theirs or ours, we shoot them down. And in other words, we were sort of a last hope defence against people there, and anybody coming over the ridge that was on our side, that they'd more or less failed in their duty by being still alive, and so they should be given the works. And somebody did come over the ridge who'd obviously been warned that they mustn't cross that ridge, that was their last redoubt. And he came over and sort of saying, don't shoot, don't shoot. And anyway, we didn't shoot him. And I signalled him to come forward, and I asked him what unit he was, and the unit that he was in was the Listers, which had this reputation of fighting to the last gasp. And he said that, you know, that they held out and they were nearly all wounded, those that were left. And he said, now they're just killing everybody. And we could hear the screams as these poor buggers were bayoneted. And they were killing everybody. My father was a Roman Catholic, and my mother had to become a Roman Catholic to marry him because they were very much disfavouring mixed marriages. And if there was a mixed marriage, which was fairly rare then, they had to give all sorts of undertakings that the children of the marriage would be brought up as Catholics. I think I was tended to be somewhat idealistic about it and thought that Catholics were mostly right. I don't mean right wing, but mostly correct. And that the world would be a much better place if it were directed by the Vatican. But I think, you know, this was a very temporary thing. By the time I was 16 or 17, that had certainly vanished. And the teachers were brothers of the Salesian order. And to put it bluntly, there were a bunch of, there were exceptions, but they included a bunch of homosexual paedophiles and sadists. You know, it was really appalling. And I decided I really wanted not much more to do with the Catholic Church. So that was really, the school experience really finished me, and I left school and came home, and I remember telling my father, I've finished with that place, I'm not going back to school. And he had to try and do something about it. I think he was shocked. But I will say that they took my word for it about just how awful it was, things that I'd kept silent about. And it really was I'm telling you, as a stranger, it really was dreadful. The sort of things that I saw and heard. Anyway, I went to art school instead and met with a bunch of what I would call incipient radicals. And of course we knew all the answers. We had the answers to everything. And had no qualms about holding forth to our friends because we had a receptive audience, and it was always hear, hear, or yes, exactly so, and you know, anything that was put into the discussion was supportive rather than opposition. So we firmly came to believe that we were rather wonderful people and had the answer to all questions. If only people like us were in control of the world, it would be a pretty perfect place, you know. I tended to favour the left, especially when I was at art school. You know, we were quite excited then about the events in Vienna in 1933, 34, with the attempted coup by the Nazis and the insurrection by the left wing and the fortification of the Karl Marx Hof in Vienna. And I think at that time we were probably rather optimistic and thought that we were in for a period when the left and would emerge triumphant, and there'd be a sort of upsurgence of the working class movement in Europe, and that we'd see in Austria, Germany probably, and France, the establishment of left-wing governments. I don't know quite what we thought about Germany. We were just horrified at the Nazi regime and the things we heard about what was going on, and quite outraged, of course, by the regime of anti-Semitism that was established in Germany. You know, park benches forbidden to Jews and things like this. Yeah, but the actual circumstances of the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War were rather peculiar because I had some relations over from the United States at that time in July 1936, and it all happened while they were here, and I was more or less entrapped on one occasion into going to mass with one of these relatives, and there were all these awful things going on. And remember, the priest from the pulpit, his best effort to make people aware of what was going on was to urge them to pray for the church in Spain. And there was this peculiar thing while left-wing or moderate newspapers like the News Chronicle referred to the military insurrectionists as rebels or insurrectionists, and the other side as the loyalists. The Telegraph, of course, the rebels were the nationalists, and the other side were the Reds. You might say that really I was an international brigader in my own mind quite a long time before I took the necessary steps to go and become one. You know, I was psychologically attuned to the idea of doing what one could and taking up arms, and as I say, there was nothing really, as I saw it, there was nothing romantic about it, there was nothing impulsive about it, there was no ideas of high adventure and doing graphically exploitable deeds of valour or anything. It was simply a matter of, this is absolutely awful, you know, and if one feels as it's as awful as one did, surely one ought to do something about it. And what could one do about it? More practical than taking up a rifle and shooting back. But what was so marvellous to me was to find myself among all these people where there could be no argument. I mean, the most important thing was this war. And it had to be, you know, I mean, I for one, I realised, was completely dedicated. And after all, you've got to be, we were there and backing with our lives, in effect, what we believed in.